I'm Dane Rose, and in this video we're going to explore a map on a trajectory of freedom and power and value. And we're going to mostly be following it along economic lines because in a capitalist culture, the pivot points are often reduced to purchasing power in one form or another. So let's get started. And the journey begins living at home with one's parents, which in the sympathy-antipathy synthesis cycle requires a rebellion, meaning you need to leave and reject the flaws in every failed system, meaning every system has a series of failures, a series of flaws. That is the nature of a system. And for evolution to take place, you need to move from the sympathy of the child to the antipathy of adolescence, the rebellion of adolescence, and reject the flawed aspects of the family system. Now, you cannot legitimately do that from the perspective of the child. I mean, every child tries to get their parents to grow up, to mature, to be fair, to stop being so hypocritical, etc. To plead, basically. Please be better parents than you are. And the parents never do, which is what results in the healthy transition into antipathy. This is, when I leave, etc. But you can't fully step into the fullness of antipathy, of rejecting the status quo, until you reach the first of the milestones on the map. And so we'll start right here. And this milestone is you being able to provide your own food, your own medical care, your own income needed to survive and feel secure in that survival and leave the house. Now, the ritual of leaving the house is useful psychologically, but realistically, if you and everyone else grasps that you could leave in a moment because you've got the purchasing power, the confidence, the options, it doesn't matter so much whether or not you actually leave, but the ability to leave. And usually, since confidence comes from experience, you don't know if you have the ability until you leave. And so leaving home is the first milestone. Now, in order to do that, you've got to start a business or become employable. Now, I started a business and I chose landscaping because there was a convergence between ecology, stuff that I could do myself, low startup capital. I needed less than $500 to start off doing maintenance. Everyone needs it, meaning everyone has a landscape. And so ecology, initiative, self-employment, low operating margin. And in fact, I wrote a book called Gardening by Bicycle. Because you really can, with $50, start a maintenance business that is enough. It's enough to get over that initial hurdle. So that's the first step. Now, the next step in whatever it is that you've chosen to do is choosing a career. Now, you can leave home just flipping burgers or whatever it is, but I had given some thought to various things that I liked doing, was able to do, was consistent with my principles. seemed healthy, etc. And so, the terrain of maintaining gardens, designing gardens, installing gardens, repairing gardens, renovating gardens. See, gardens is a huge canvas. You've got electrical, you've got plumbing, you've got drainage, you've got grading, you've got stonework, you've got driveways, you've got garden sheds, you've got arbors, you've got 5,000 plants, you've got design and layering over time. You've got, it's just an endless canopy of outdoor kitchens. There's no end if you want to get into it. Welding, fence work, water features. So it's a pretty big field. And so that, keeps things interesting. And the more complex the field, the more talent is required. And so the next path is to get good, is to get into the 1%. So that's the next path, the next step. Now, what does it mean to be in the 1%? It just means to be better than 90% of, or 99% of the people in that field. Now, this is from the perspective of the client. That could be your boss, or it could be the landscape customer, right? Whatever it is, it's from the perspective of your client. Now, here's the really important thing to understand. You can be an absolute pain in the neck and highly expensive and be in the top 1% in some technical capacity. You know stonework better than 99% of stonemasons. But most clients don't care if the stonework is 2% different or 3% different or 5%. Most of them don't have the eye. So if you're a pain in the neck, don't show up, have a drinking habit, don't return phone calls, and then show up from time to time to do the top 1% of stonework. In many cases, you will be unemployable, right? Because I'd rather hire someone who is cheerful, shows up on time, does a reasonable job at a reasonable price, and is only in the top 20%, right? And so the 80-20 principle is perhaps more useful in that you want to be in the top 20%. Well, at least 80% of the benefit comes from being in the top 20%. Now, if there's a niche and you have the talent to market yourself, one of the benefits of getting into the top 1% is that you are always employed, meaning when there's a large marketplace of, as in the case of landscaping, etc., the economy could go into a major recession for 5 years, and a billionaire may sell 30% of their homes. We don't really need the home in Aspen. We're not visiting Cabo that much, but we're going to keep the San Francisco resident. Now, you had 10 billion, now you've got 3 billion. Are you going to have a crappy garden? Are you not going to renovate, etc.? You see, in the top 1% of craftspeople, of talent, are always employed by the top 1% who have resources. And they always have more than enough resources to do what's important to them. So that's one benefit of being in the top 1%, meaning the whole 50% of your industry could be laid off for 5 years. But if you're in the top 1%, you've got a 6-month backlog. There could be 3 or 4 millionaires, billionaires competing and waiting to get the top 1%. Because it's an unusual personality that aspires to that. One of the reasons is the brain hierarchy. traumatized cultures stimulate and produce a dominance in reptilian brains. Reptilian brains are based on fear. Someone who's operating in fear will do whatever they need to do to stay just ahead of their fear, and then they'll stop. Because there's no dream, there's no compelling vision. And so part of your internal path is to go from reaction out of fear towards vision out of love, out of desire, right? Because to do that, you have to move out of the reptilian brain, through the rational brain into the empathic brain, where you love something, where you care about it. Once you do that, you've got a fuel that reptiles do not have. Now, we produce a large quantity of reptiles in human form, meaning they're operating out of fear, in fight, flight, and freeze to avoid humiliation, to avoid destitution, to avoid getting caught at whatever they're doing. Maybe there's greed in there too. But there isn't the love that can create the vision. You see, love leads to long-term thinking. You know, when you think about your planet, when you think about your company and 7 generations and 7 decades, it's not a greed-fear dynamic. Greed-fear dynamic can keep you in the next quarter, right? I'm going to do this so I can do this so I can do this, and and I'm running away from that, and I'm doing this, and I'm juggling all of these things out of greed and fear. But someone with vision can look 10 years down the road and say, I care about this, and I'm going to start making adjustments today so that 5 years from now, this starts to open up, because that's exciting, because I desire that. And that's a very important movement. And as part of this, you may need to become traumatically literate. The Body Keeps the Score gives a good overview in Bessel van der Kolk's book on the landscape of trauma and the cult elements that produce large concentrations of trauma in our population. And hints at a few of the things that can begin to respond to that trauma. UnderstandTrauma.com, a project of my own, gives more awareness of some of the pitfalls, some of the round and round traps of traumatic environments, and some of the language and paradigms that could be useful in breaking orbit from the traumatic cycle. It takes a tremendous amount of energy and risking death. One must face one's fear of death in order to transcend the traumatic circle, which is the movement towards adulthood. Because it's not enough just to rebel and reject the flaws in your cult, the flaws in your family, the flaws in your partner, the flaws in yourself. One must move towards synthesis, the adult state of taking the best of what has been, rejecting the worst of what has been, and imagining the best of what could be, and fusing and being a part of that. It doesn't get handed to you. To be an adult is to create what you want that never existed before, that will not exist if you don't create it. And this is all part of moving towards the most expedient is to be in the top 20%. That's enough. Because if you're in the top 20% of your industry and the industry gets hit 50%, and you have a way of communicating your supremacy, that you're part of the 20%. Okay, the industry gets cut in half. Who do people want to hire? The bottom 50%? or the top 20%, right? So there's always enough room at the top. In fact, at the very top, there is a desperate search for competency. My entire life running my company, I've waited for high levels of intelligence and competency. And it's shown up as a glimmer here and there. But I could give a 2-hour lecture on how any one of even the best of my employees could have done 10 times better and benefited the company more than they did and made 10 times more than they did. With my great blessing, please, get in here and do this, right? Because if you will make the company more money by producing more value to more clients, you can have as much as you want, as long as the company is, if you're making more money for the company, you as long as you keep that formula in mind, you double your value to the company, and then you want half of that. You double your value to the company, and you want half of that. Well, you can just keep getting 50% raises if you can do that every single year. Double your value to the company. And what's interesting, for example, in landscaping, most of the things that are most useful are not horticultural. You do need that. But a lot of the differentiation is things like returning phone calls. So at this point, when I was refining excellence in my journey, I asked my clients, I said, you've hired contractors before. What are you annoyed about? What bothers you? Now, why start with that? Well, the brain has an interesting division, meaning you have a little bit of something that's irritating or upsetting or threatening. Maybe 2%, 5%. The brain will spend 80% of its energy directed at the 1 to 2% problem. And you can see this when you're out in a beautiful landscape with pastoral vistas on all directions. You're waiting at heavenly day. Your eye catches a little wriggle in the corner of your eye in the pond that you're in. And your brain deletes all of that beauty in a second and looks at that and tries to figure out if that's a snake. And even if it wasn't a snake, for the next 10 minutes, you're thinking, what if it was, and what would I have done, and this and that, the other. In other words, the negative eclipses the positive in the brain. And so if you can solve people's gripes and irritations, you get more mileage than if you don't solve their gripes and irritations, but do something else amazing, right? So you could have the most magnificent symphony, and you could make the symphony 10 times more beautiful, and you could spend 10 years doing that. But if you've got a thumbtack in the person's chair, one irritant, it's just a tiny little thumbtack. They don't give a shit about the symphony. They want the thumbtack out of their chair, right? And so that mindset, knowing what to get rid of for your boss, for your clients, is the key thing there to start. So I asked my clients, they all said the same thing. They didn't return my calls. They showed up and took the deposit, and then they were scattered, and I couldn't get them to finish the job. I told them I wanted this, and they said this and this, but it didn't happen, or they didn't do what they said they did. It cost more than they said they would. It cost more than they said it would cost. And these things drove them nuts. In other words, if I could eliminate cost overruns, if I could get the job done early, if I could make them feel important, if I could respond promptly to all outreach, I'd eliminate all of their irritants. And so that's what I set out to do in my business. One job, full attention until complete, flat costs for all work, no hidden costs. Everyone gets a return phone call. Now it would be a return email or text in the same day. And write things down. Pretty simple, right? And the other thing that was the tricky part of this was actually understanding that a lot of the delay and confusion, etc., came because there wasn't a good design process. So this was the one thing that was hard to do. I developed an 8-page questionnaire to bring into the foreground all the things that the clients would throw at me coming, during the process, right? If someone walks out in the middle of a landscape project and says, oh, by the way, where am I going to put my RV? What RV? You never mentioned an RV. Well, I've had an RV. It's out in storage. I'm going to be putting my RV. And you expected me to know that with my psychic powers? Well, you're the professional. You didn't think I had an RV? Don't people have RVs? Where am I going to put my RV? It's like, well, right where we're putting all these plants. That's what we have to tear up all the plants, do this. That's what happens without a good design process. And a good design process cannot take place without detailed information. And detailed information cannot take place without a detailed questionnaire. So if you ask 8 pages of questions for all the strange things that may or may not come up, and it's fine if someone says, no RV, no hot tub, we're not going to be getting solar panels, no, we don't have dogs, no, we're not worried about poisonous plants, no, we don't care about that, no, we don't care about that, that's fine. But if they do, you need to know about it and figure out those things in advance. So, so studying design and the communication protocol, solved all that. So this gets you in the top 20%. That's a good starting point. From there, you can decide if you love an area, a niche, enough to be in the top 1%. Now, it has to be somewhat specialized. Now, and this is something to consider about this area here, because to be in the top 1% or the top 1% of 1% in the world, or at least in your accessible marketplace, you see a violinist can fly around the world, but landscape companies can't go to other areas. So you just have to be in the top 1% for, the 4-hour drive around your area for the most part. People don't usually import contracting crews. So, that's a more limiting field. But if you're a coder and you want to be in the top 1% of the world, well, you're competing with every country on Earth, right? So it's a harder bar. But the bigger the marketplace of your competition, and the more involved the skill is to be in the top 1%, you may have to get quite specialized. Now, my specialization is on good generalized service. What I mean by that is my clients need someone that understands the big picture and sees it through on time and on budget from start to finish more than they need the top 1% of welding for a garden, more than they need the top 1% of carpentry for a garden, more than they need the top 1% of concrete work in a garden. They need just the top 80%. But they want it synchronized. They don't want their homes torn up for years as specialty subs fly in from around the world. They want things to keep flowing and it to be good enough. No stress, no hassle, no what's going on here. One person, full attention until complete, on time, on budget, no surprises. Well above average, basically, is enough. So that's the specialized, is the service, is the convenience. Now, of course, I could have become the best water feature installer over the last 29 years, or the top fence builder. But the gap in the industry that I perceived was more about synthesis than about top dollar, top quality something. You know, what I found when I entered the landscape industry was there were lots of people that knew a lot of things about very little, but no one that knew how to bring it all together. Landscapers were destroying septic systems when I entered the field, for example, because they didn't study septic systems, and the septic designers didn't think it was their business to educate landscapers, and the homeowner was ignorant about both of them. And so there are all kinds of those things. Homeowners that were building houses were not synchronizing with site development. And so the site developer would clear more native forestry than was necessary because they didn't know what they were doing. There wasn't coordination between landscape design, install, etc. So it was these bridgings of disciplines that was what I realized was costing the industry billions of dollars of waste because people weren't talking to each other and didn't know that they weren't talking to each other and didn't know what the ramifications were, and neither did the client. And so it was an unconscious, steady stream of waste. And that's what I wanted to solve. So this is your kind of your second stop. Now this can be within a company. This can be for a boss. This can be, you know, you've always got a boss. You just have to decide whether you're complete, meaning if you can satisfy a client alone and you can fund the infrastructure alone, then you can be a separate company. If you're doing laser physics that requires a $100 million lab and you don't have a $100 million lab, then you've got to do that either as a rental or a lease or within another company. But you can be a division. You know, you can approach someone with that infrastructure and say, you know, could I use these things at these moments when you don't need them? I will give you a third of my proceeds, and I'll take care of the marketing, the client. We won't compete. You know, so you've got those types of things. So. Brian Tracy, Advanced Selling Strategies, was probably more useful than my horticultural knowledge initially. Getting good mentors in the top of their field and inviting, you know, saying, please, will you be my mentor? I will pay you whatever you want to be paid, but I need to have rapid access to your expertise's view on this decision. And, you know, after a time of drawing in 3 or 4, 5 different mentors in different disciplines and seeing how those fit together, you know, I didn't need to call them as much. You know, it takes a couple of years to see how and really understand each of their you know, concrete work and septic work and drainage work and heavy equipment operation and irrigation and plant horticulture. You know, these things are always intersecting, but, you know, it's a lot to learn. I chose to be paid to learn these things by just charging very little for my clients and understanding this was my university degree. Being paid to learn something that you're actually going to use and learning it while helping people is far more intelligent than leaving your life to go do simulations that don't help anyone and paying a lot of money to do that so you get a piece of paper. And particularly in the United States, if you can get the job done, it doesn't matter that much in many fields, whether or not you have the paper. I have never cared about an employee's paper. I don't care if they finish high school. I don't care any of that. I give them a day's work. Starting with the interview. Can they answer questions? Can they think? Do they show up on time? What questions do they ask me? I look at that and I evaluate their intelligence. I give them 8 hours of work to do. I look at their speed. I look at their motivation. I look at their demeanor. I look at how they responded, and I look at how interested they are in doing it again. You know, if after 8 hours of trenching work with a pick, this is hard work, well, they're not going to last a year. Why hire them, right? If they can get the job done, they've just showed that they can get the job done. And if that changes at some point, they can't get the job done, that's why they're let go. It's not, you don't need a piece of paper. And I made a decision in my choice to drop out of high school to do homeschooling. I made a very clear decision that I would never work for an individual that lacked the competence to assess my competence on their own. Meaning, if someone looked at me and said, "You seem to be doing a great job, but your paperwork isn't what I'd like it to be," or if someone said, "You're doing a terrible job, but you've got a great set of paper," you know, I'm not going to work for someone who lacks the competency to evaluate my performance, or who values my performance less than the paperwork that is supposed to reflect performance. And so I never have worked for anyone other than myself. But you know, if I ever did, I would demonstrate what I thought were my strengths. And if those were not needed or valued, then that's fine. But if they didn't have the intelligence to evaluate who I am and what I'm doing, plenty of people to work for, right? If you're good. So that's all part of what's getting to an important part of freedom, because doing basic, hourly work and all that, there's tons of stuff that you can do to leave home. Now you've got the freedom to live in your own space, right? But getting to the next point, you've got to be talented, right? Because you've got to be able to put money away in investments. Now, the first series of investments are all about you and your ability, hiring mentors at whatever it costs, paying for your mistakes. You're going to make lots of mistakes, and they're going to be expensive to some degree or another, and you're going to have to pay for them. And so your client shouldn't be paying for your mistakes. Your boss shouldn't be paying for your mistakes. You should be. And that attitude will earn a lot of respect from clients and bosses. Just, it's a respectful attitude. I want to be great, and I'm going to have to make a certain amount of mistakes, and I'm going to pay them. I mean, that is a beloved attitude. I meet that every now and again in 10% of my employees, and I love it. I love my the 10% of employees that actually is thinking about me, who is their customer. Now, it may take about 5 years, maybe 10 years to get good, particularly in something as huge where you have, as I mentioned, there's about 20 separate disciplines in landscaping, and each one you could spend, somewhere between a month and a year getting good at them. And so it's, but you just have to understand enough to know when to do it yourself, when it's worth learning, when to recommend to somebody else, so that your customer overall gets what they want and need. This is the second stage of success and freedom, to get really good at something so that you can be hired at a high hourly rate. Now, you don't have to work hourly. It's best not to. But what you need to be thinking of is, how do you get your hourly rate to a point where it's a minimum of $200 an hour? That's your goal. I want to be so valuable that, I'll say I'll do this for $1,000, I'll do this for $20,000, I'll do this for $30,000, that if you add up your hours from start to finish, including all the paperwork and all that, that you're making more than $200 an hour, $300 an hour. Why not? $400. But $300 is probably a good thing to aim for. And it's in my contracting capacity, I don't know, I'm probably around $700 an hour, and it could be much more. But I'm much more interested in other things, and I have enough money, and so but the threshold that you're trying to reach here is where you can put more than $100 an hour into investments. So whatever that is, I mean, if you can make $200 an hour and live on $30 an hour, and put, make $130 an hour, live on $30 an hour, and put $100 in investments, that's kind of that's success at this point, is $100 an hour in investing. Now this will take you 1, 2, 3, or if you've got various impediments, can't make more than dad, I'm afraid of being big, someone's going to kill me, all these traumatic, different barriers. This could take 10, 20 years, but logistically it'll take 3 years. Meaning if you're efficient and go through this process and learn, and you don't have psychological resistance. I remember having an absolute panic whenever my savings got above $10,000 for more than a few months. So my income went from $7 an hour to, rapidly to around $16 an hour. I had all this stuff come up around going from $16 to $20 an hour. Then my income was going up to, $200 an hour, but I had to spend it quickly. I couldn't have any around. It was going to be taken from me. There was this big psychological thing. Now, where do these things come from? What do you do with them? Nobody tells you any of this stuff. Your body has these reactions to all kinds of things for no particular reason that you've been told in business school or wherever it is that you've gone. You're just responding to these things. And so, I remember the discipline I had to go to get to a $10,000 stable savings. And then from there, it was pretty easy to go up to $30,000, where $30,000 was always in the bank as a backup fund. So I didn't have that much in, I had big resistance going from $16 an hour to $20 an hour. No resistance at all going from $20 an hour to, $70 an hour, and then by the job to $200. No problem there. But there's all this resistance around saving a certain amount of money. One of the things I learned was I was an adrenaline junkie. I liked rushing around to get checks to clear. This was my big video game, basically. I put this amount here, this one's going to, check is going to clear in this amount, and I'm going to rush over here, I'm going to get this job done in a day, I'm going to wait to get the check from the client, put it in the bank, and I've won, right? I'm at level 2 now. Week number 2 out of the month, and that was my video game. And with all this money in the bank and stuff, what am I rushing around for? There's no rush, right? So where's my game? Where's my adrenaline, right? It wasn't there, right? That was huge psychological withdrawal and stuff around that because, and nobody will tell you any of this, which is, part of the stupidity of a psychologically illiterate culture, right? So all the things that affect your life more than almost anything else, nobody tells you about. And it creates a blind spot. And what do people do? They walk into walls because they can't see them, right? And so we have a tremendous amount of waste, and you have a great chance to get a head start on those types of things by becoming psychologically literate. And that's why I'm more interested in that than I am in, landscaping or, hitting a target of income way beyond what I, need to do everything I want to do. So once you've got $100 an hour going into investing, and at first that'll be spent on your mentors and paying for your mistakes and paying for your education and buying your equipment and learning to, which locks aren't stolen from and how to train employees and whatever it is that you're learning. So you've got that. You're investing in yourself first to the point where you get competent. Then you've got $100 an hour in investments. Now, if you're working, let's say 30 hours a week, I think that's a great ratio. I'm down to 20 hours a week max, and that's even better for me. But let's just say you've got $2,000 a week or $8,000 a month going towards investing. This is a fast track towards some of the next goals that you want to get to. So if you've got $8,000 a month or $80,000 a year going into investments, first of all, how do you get that in so that you're not paying a lot of taxes? So there's a couple of things. You can do a month's worth of this in an IRA. About $6,000 a year as an individual can go into an IRA. Do that. A tax-deferred IRA, so you don't have to pay taxes on the amount going in. The next is a solo 401k, which is ideal if you are having your own business. Look into that. If you're in a company, do they have a solo, or a 401k plan, and do they have any matching funds? Put it into that. Put as much as possible into something like that. Now, here's another thing to consider. We're focusing a lot on quality of life and well-being, and it is a well-known fact that if you do what you love and you have all the money you need to survive, and you have all the money you need to be secure in that survival, and you have love and belonging in your life, that's a talent to create and move into the antithesis of the cult that kills off love and belonging and actually learn to generate it. And you know what your true talents are. You've earned self-esteem. That's deciding what you value and living up to those values. If you decide what you value clearly and you live up to your values, the person I want to be behaves like this, and you earn that with discipline, right? And you measure, like, yeah, I did pretty good. I'm not lying, I'm not cheating, and a lot of not lying and not cheating is having enough independence to say the truth that you want to say. If you're living at home and your parents are a jerk because they won't let you do what you want to do with your time while you're living at home, and you won't earn enough money to leave home, then the only way to do what you want to do is to lie and to cheat. But nobody aspires to that. So part of what we're doing here is creating enough resources and power that you don't have to lie and cheat. I've told many women, I'm happy to have a sexual relationship with you, but given the limited amount of time that you are investing in the relationship, and given the limited amount of skill you have at meeting my needs, this will not be a monogamous relationship if we do have a sexual relationship. And if you don't want that, that's fine. But if you do, I will be seeing other partners to fill in the pieces that you're not bringing to the table. I've never lied to a woman. I've never cheated on a woman. I've had open relationships, and I've steered out of hundreds of probable sexual relationships because I'm not going to agree. I love monogamous relationships with a person who's able and willing to show up for a full-on mental, emotional, financial, sexual partnership to grow together. You only have time to do that really deeply with one person. So it's just a question of, do they have the ability and willingness to show up to be that person? If they do, I don't stop being curious or fascinated with emotional, sexual probabilities that I don't have time for. But if I have plenty of time, because my girlfriend or friends are not showing up. I once had 5 girlfriends. They each showed up 1 or 2 nights a week. Okay, so between 5 girlfriends, there was a daily rich relationship. There doesn't have to be lies, right? So you have to, part of self-esteem, you decide who you want to be, the person you want to be, and then you measure yourself. Am I this person? I want to be like this. I want to tell the truth. I want to be interested in win-win, right? That's a big one. It's easy to have win-lose relationships because there are a lot of people that are predisposed to be losers, even if you're winning, but it's no fun, right? So to have win-win relationships, people have to think and take more responsibility. So it takes a little bit more effort to have a win-win with people predisposed to lose or be taken advantage of, right? But I like win-win relationships. And so, if someone shows up and just says, here, I'm here, I say, okay, well, what is it? What's your win look like? And then I'll point out, I'm not the person for that. Or I am the person for that, but you're going to have to do this and this and this. It has to be win-win or no deal, right? So that's all, part of this process of meeting our human needs, to earn self-esteem, to develop our gifts. We've been talking about that. To bring enormous value to other people with those gifts. We're beginning to explore that. Once we do that and create real wealth, it is our greatest joy to be of service to evolution, to something greater than ourselves, to life. And that's where some of this money can get invested. So, if you're generating $8,000 a month in investments, you're going to start paying a lot of taxes, first on the income, and then on the capital gains for the income. So I'm touching on this movement of being of service because it ties in with tax management and future planning. So I think one of the first things you may want to do is buy or build a house with this. This is a good investment to get to the point, because the interest can be written off as a tax write-off, because you can design a higher quality of life in this process. And so it's a great thing to do. So it's another form of freedom also. If you're renting, you've got landlord requirements. You can have pets. You can't have this. Or the neighbors don't want you staying up till 3 a.m, whatever it is. And so I would move from renting, leasing, etc., into a house that you build or construct that facilitates your quality of life in the way that you want it. For example, my second house that I built, I was in a relationship with a woman where we needed our own space at times. And so I built the house so that she had her own little apartment when she was visiting. It was a long distance relationship. And so she'd have her own entrance and stuff. And then we could very easily spend the evening or whatever together, kind of by almost calling each other up. Hey, you want to do this together, whatever? Sure, okay, we'll walk down the corridor and, we'll connect. But there's no requirement of that. And I find that's very useful in maintaining the quality of chemistry and flow. Because what happens when you're living together and there is no alternative, you don't ask the question what you want. Meaning if you wake up and it's raining outside and you want to play some loud music, but your partner doesn't want to listen to that loud music, they become an impediment, right, to your expression. And it's rude to say, go out in the rain, I want to listen to some loud music, or just leave the house, I want to find out what I want to do. That's not good for chemistry. And you don't even ask what you want to do when it is rude to hear the answer. The thing is, I don't want you in my house today. But that isn't going to go over very well. And so if you can have separate spaces where you have to take proactive action to be together, and again, together, and if you don't take proactive action, it's not causing an active rejection. It's just not an active connecting that day. It's much easier to connect. And so there's lots of value. If you're running a business, you can have a shop, or you can set up your space, or it can be soundproof. In the house I'm in right now, it's very important. Little sounds get in the sound system. And so since I'm doing a lot of these types of presentations, it's a big deal to be able to have a quiet place that is, not invaded by lawnmowers and this and that and the other. And so this is a good place to put money into, is I guess what I'm saying. That can defer a lot of taxes and create some tax write-off for your business, is to get a house. And then the house will appreciate in value over time. And so that's a good starting point. But where I'm going to go next is starting a nonprofit. Now, in Delaware, you can be the treasurer, the secretary, and whatever it is, the three roles basically that you need to run a corporation. You can start a nonprofit corporation in Delaware for around $500 using LegalZoom. I've done this several times. You can then put $50,000 of your income into that nonprofit as a tax write-off. The nonprofit can invest in cryptocurrency if you get an account. We have an account on BlockFi. I have a solo 401k on Celsius that, I can put around $35,000 a year in investment income there. And the value, I'm always trying to avoid paperwork. And what I'm getting at is if you continue in this trajectory towards freedom and wealth and fulfilling your human needs, if you are a normal, healthy person, you're going to reach a point when one of your greatest joys is to be of service to beauty, truth, and goodness in the world, in your own way. Now, why donate money to a nonprofit that's going to take massive amounts of overhead and is not going to spend it the way you want to spend it and isn't going to leave you disconnected from the service. You're not meeting those children. You're not actually contributing your talent, etc. Why give to another nonprofit when you can put $50K a year? Now, here's a couple of kind of grease points, flow points. So first of all, if you're starting a very basic nonprofit that you do not anticipate will need more than $50,000 a year of funding, it's fast-tracked through the IRS. So you can get it in a couple of months. Costs $500. If the revenue stream of the nonprofit is less than $50,000 a year, you do not have to file a formal tax return. Now, a nonprofit's tax return is a pain in the neck. How was this money spent? What's your goals? What's this? What's that? Etc. So it could be a good discipline, but I'd rather put that time and energy into the nonprofit rather than doing paperwork for the IRS. And it then costs $1,000 a year to do a nonprofit return, or maybe more, right? So now you're diluting the impact of your generosity by diverting it to accountants. Plus, if you plan on a small nonprofit, you can bypass the most unpleasant part of the nonprofit, which is going out and asking people to give you money they don't want to give you. So I have two nonprofits. I give $50,000 a year to one, and I give $50,000 a year to the other. So I have two nonprofits, $50K each. So, you're close to that at the $100 an hour. After you put into your home, after you put into your 401k or solo 401k, after you put into your IRA, you could now spend the balance on a nonprofit. Now, the reason I started a nonprofit is, for example, I noticed we have a homeless epidemic in, my area of California. That's odd. Now, if I go and do something about that, talk to them, give out money, write a book, give out books, I have to pay taxes on all of that work. So I have to buy the resources on tax-earned money and give them away as a public service. So that's, in California, at least a 35% tax on any kind of charitable work that I might do. I don't want that, number one. But here's the other thing. You can take a reasonable salary as a director or person in a nonprofit. And most of the most important jobs in the world are poorly paid. A mother is perhaps the most profound job in the world. You don't get a penny for it. Helping someone move through trauma and addiction. They don't have any money if they're broke on the street to give you, right? But if you can take someone who's otherwise going to consume $1 million of public money and live a horrible life and turn them into a contributing taxpayer in 3 months, the fact that the cult will not pay you a dime to do that is a symptom of cult stupidity. It's not a symptom that isn't worth millions of dollars. There's a lot of those types of jobs that need to be done, that are incredibly important for public well-being, and that no one has the intelligence to pay you to do those jobs, to write that book, to help this person, to help get them to an attorney, whatever it is that you decide is important. Now, I think that's a tremendously great form of freedom to be able to spend one's time doing whatever one believes in with the goal of win-win. And a nonprofit structure is a beautiful structure to do that from. So what I see in the kind of synergy of the nonprofit is a couple of things. First of all, I can put $100,000 of my money every single year into 2 nonprofit entities, and all of that money is tax-free. That's the first thing. The second is at under $50,000 each, there is no accounting and legal tax to do all the paperwork. They cost $100 a year to maintain. Third, they can invest in crypto, which would normally have very, very high capital gains tax. But nonprofit crypto accounts have no capital gains tax. So they can appreciate faster. And they can do more trading, because if you have to pay 20% capital gains or 30% capital gains every time you take a profit or trade, it kind of takes a lot of the wind out of your trading. So that's, the part that's fun to trade and invest money within a nonprofit framework. You get to play the video game of making money without the tax deflation or, the constant stealing of your winnings. And then it's more fun because you're going to do something to help other people. But it's also a more flexible form of employment. Because I don't ever want to stop being useful. I just want to spend more of my useful time doing things that I think are important to do, and less of my time saying I have to do this to pay the rent, etc. I've got to do this to make money. I want to do things that I think are important. Now, my kind of plan with these nonprofits is that they create passive income that exceeds the expenses, so more than expenses. This makes the nonprofit independent. So for example, Ethereum, which is one cryptocurrency that's currently in vogue, and it's the one that I'm most interested in at this time. You can have Ethereum, which is appreciating an average of 100% a year or more over time. So that's growing. Free of capital gains. The deposits into it are tax-free. And then you can stake the Ethereum on BlockFi and earn 5%. So $100,000 staked in Ethereum goes up an average of 100% a year. But it also earns $5,000 for being staked, which means that you've got passive income, even if it stays the same. So you're earning $5,000 a year. So I have one employee in the nonprofit, and it's exciting to be at the point where the passive income earned as the nonprofit goes up in value pays the nonprofit's employee, so that if I did absolutely nothing for the rest of my life, that nonprofit would continually increase in value through its investment portfolio, so that it can do more good every single year, right? So there is a possibility that at some point I might say, let's retire from my main business and, take a $50,000 salary from the nonprofit, which is my money donated into it to fund good things, so that I can devote all my time to that, rather than right now I'm donating 4 hours a day to my nonprofit and not taking a salary. But it's increasing my power by increasing my options, meaning I am the best choice to hire if I want to hire myself for the nonprofit. And by putting hundreds of thousands of my own money into the nonprofit in an investment account rather than just spending it, my principle, my protocol is that I will donate my time for however long the nonprofit needs me to donate my time, but I will not spend the nonprofit's money by taking its principal. I'll only spend its appreciating value every year, up to that. And maybe I'll spend half of that. Maybe if the nonprofit earns $100,000 in investment profits that year, I'll spend $50,000 working on the nonprofit causes and leave the other $50,000 to reinvest, so that next year it has more money and more money and more money. And as a result is a sustainable long-term venture that does not drain me or the nonprofit. It feeds everything, involved. So I think that's a good thing to consider setting up early, because I think if you can operate within a nonprofit framework, it's fun to do things that are good for humanity that are not for profit. Now, what do I mean? Planting trees, for example. It's fun. Plant 1,000 trees and be carbon neutral. Do that with one of your dividends from your nonprofit. Help someone who needs dental work, right? And nice person you meet, they're friendly, they're kind, they need $1,000 of dental work or whatever they can't afford. Well, that's nonprofit work, right? You get to see someone's dental work, help someone with their education in a poor country, and just ask that they pay it forward. You give someone a lawyer's degree and you say, here's $20,000 for your lawyer's degree. All I ask is you spend 10% of your time helping the most vulnerable and worthy people in your population. And you send me a report every year and show who you helped. And we'll add that to the roster of accomplishments of the nonprofit, right? That's sustainable. That's intelligent. That's fun. Meeting these people, finding out, giving away stuff that turns into more stuff, that turns into more stuff that makes people happy. There's nothing funner than that. John D. Rockefeller, loved giving away money in the Rockefeller Foundation, et cetera. Andrew Carnegie, it's incredibly fun to give away well-being in a sustainable way, meaning you're planting seeds in a way that they will grow. So the investments into the nonprofit will grow into more. That's one set of seeds. But also, don't just give someone food, give them a degree or something, in a way that they can then do the work of the nonprofit. That's fun. So this is kind of part of this whole process. You also, and one other thing about a solo 401k is you can borrow up to $50,000 against it, for something if you ever needed it. So that's useful. As a general rule, unless interest rates are incredibly cheap and you're doing it for investments, as a general rule, it's good to pay off debts, particularly credit card debts, and earn points. So, you've got a whole maximizing of income along those lines. Your next form of freedom, however, is to design your business so that you could be anywhere on the planet. So, let's say you've got $300,000 or more in your own kind of fund, and then you've got, let's say, $150,000 or more in your retirement fund, and you're a young person. And let's say you've got $200,000 in your nonprofit, one or two nonprofits, etc. And there's a book called 10x Giving. I'll put it in the area below to kind of give some sense of some of the fun things you can do with a nonprofit. So you've now kind of got control of maybe $70,000 or $700,000 of money, and you've got your appreciating house, and so you're moving along. The thing you want to be able to do is reach this level of freedom where you can work 50% of the time or less doing your work for money, your talent, the thing that's generating your $100 an hour in investment. You want to get to the point where you can either take off 6 months of the year, or half of every day, work 4 hours a day, or work 3 months, off 3 months, work 3 months, off 3 months, etc. So you want to get to the point where you have discretionary use of 50% of your 8-hour workday. So your work added up throughout the year doesn't take more than maybe 3 hours a day of your time. That's, you figure out your own milestone, but at that point, there's something really important that opens up. First of all, you can buy citizenship or permanent residency for $200,000 in most cases. So now you've got freedom of movement. And if you've got control of your time, like you can take off for 6 months or work a month on or work a month off, you can now bilocate. Now, this is really an important part of power and freedom, to be where you want to be when you want to be there, and not have that be controlled by money. And because of citizenship by investment programs, you can do that once you have at least $300,000 in your own savings. And you can get there. You can get to this whole point, in less than 11 years if you have this as a tentative, vision and roadmap. You can move through this from, you all the way from, leaving home to, first step, getting a job in some capacity. Second, choosing a career and getting really good to a point where you can put $100 an hour every hour you work into investments by getting in the top 20% of that field, and then putting that money into your IRA, your house, your 401k or solo 401k, and then starting a nonprofit. And also saving some money and paying the taxes on that, so that you have a personal fund that is invested. You can reach to this important point where you can live primarily wherever you want to live. Now, I traveled around the whole world and found that Thailand was my favorite place to live. And so I started living 6 months of the year in Thailand. I'd work 2 or 3 months, and then I'd take a 1 to 2 month vacation, work a month or two, take a 1 to 2 month vacation, and just go back and forth. They had a 60-day tourist visa. I didn't get it to the point where I had bought citizenship, etc., partly because their business policies aren't as friendly as their tourist policies. But, that is something to consider. But this was a huge boost in well-being and happiness. The other thing that you want to do as part of this, because meaningful relationships, love and belonging, is the most meaningful part of life, is you want to reach the point where you can not only live anywhere you want to live, but where you can spend time with anyone you want to spend time with, based on their presence. Presence is one of the highest forms of chemistry. Joy in the presence of another. I just feel peaceful, calm, beautiful, happy around you. While I'm on vacation and I'm going back to Russia, I'm doing this, I've got to do this and this, I can't move, I don't have any money, I don't think. There's this joy in the presence. You know, if you're running a nonprofit and can do your work remotely and online, or your investments are earning $70,000 a year in passive income, you can go to a lot of places and that can just pay for your lifestyle. You can spend time with the people you want to spend time with for as long as you want to spend time with them. That's a tremendous amount of freedom most people do not have. And it's a powerful form of, it's a very important form of lifestyle. And you can also, leverage, one of the things I'm doing with 10X Living and the community that I'm looking at in the Philippines, is you can then look at ways to increase quality of life while decreasing living expenses. That's an incredibly valuable point, but it requires a certain amount of infrastructure expenditure. But if you have $300,000, $350,000 plus your investment accounts and your nonprofit, you can consider investing in things that provide you with you and other people you like, with a higher quality of life than you may have ever experienced by creating a microculture. You can create microcultures with individuals. You can also do that with a group. And so this is some of the mechanisms, some of the rationale, some of the numbers, some of the strategy to get from a place of being bound in someone else's home, in a place where you have to do things and think and say the things and fit into their identity, towards transcending your family, towards transcending your initial job, towards transcending your culture, towards transcending your country, and moving to a point where everything that you do is consistent with your values, is done because you believe in it. It's satisfying. It takes you towards the person you want to be because it's important. And you can do it. And these are some of the steps to get to that point. Live where you want to live. Do what you want to do with the people you want to do it with. Focusing on sustainable well-being. And with nobody telling you, you cannot do that, you can't go there, you can't think this. I'd love to hear how you're doing along this journey. And if I can help, it would be fun to do that as well. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm. And out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. it doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.